Hi, I'm Ashley with Campbell. Thanks for investing your time to help your community be a great place to live. Before you watch the video, make sure to click the subscribe button so that we can help you make educated decisions as a board member. All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Ashley over at Campbell Property Management, and it is 12 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the Local Recertification and Building Safety Inspection Program CEU course. Before we do get started, your microphone and camera are automatically disabled. And for those of you not as familiar with Campbell, we have been in business since 1953, and we do currently manage over 450 community associations from Miami-Dade now all the way into Central Florida, so Orlando and Daytona. We love bringing free education to you in the form of these webinars. You can always go back and look at our past webinars at campbellevents.org and also see our upcoming webinars also at campbellevents.org. And so without further ado, I am going to stop sharing and hand it over to Scott Harvey-Lewis at Building Mavens to kick us off.
Well, thanks, Ashley, and welcome everyone. I appreciate the attendance. And the topic for today is going to be our local recertifications and building safety rules for South Florida. Now, I know many of you are familiar maybe with the statewide rules that govern the milestone inspection, which is also structural safety inspection. But today we're going to focus really on the nuances of the local recertification rules as it applies to Palm Beach County, Broward County, and Dade County. So to kick things off, let's get to the presentation. We're going to go in a little background about the company and myself. So again, my name is Scott Lewis. I'm a licensed engineer in Florida. Predominantly, my background has been structural engineering, starting out with design and then throughout time doing inspections. The firm I founded back in 2022 after the collapse at Surfside. And predominantly, it was to educate and assist in the efforts to keep Florida safe. As we know, those new rules, the milestones, the structural integrity reserve studies came out, and it was something that I was doing as a professional before. And since then, we've done hundreds of building inspections throughout the Tri-County area, as well as the state. And our focus is the building safety inspections, the new laws, as well as other statutory requirements, such as turnover inspections. And we also serve as expert witnesses on construction defect claims. And one thing that sets the firm apart is that it's multidisciplinary. So we do the electrical inspections, we do the thermography, and if it's coming to existing buildings, we also have mechanical and architectural in-house as well. So today, what we're going to focus on is the local recertification programs. And again, we might be familiar with the statewide law and how it says buildings need to be structurally inspected at the 30-year mark and how it pertains to substantial deterioration. But as we dive deeper into the local jurisdictions, Miami-Dade County, Broward County, and Palm Beach County, we're going to see that there's nuances between those requirements and also how it ties in with the milestone inspection, so that we're not thinking that there's two different processes that we have to follow as condominium boards. We're also going to look at the inspections themselves, what they entail, and also understanding the reports that need to be delivered and what our responsibilities are, not just the professional, but you on the call as well. Now, one of the key differences with the statewide law versus the local programs is that the state has said that the local programs can be a little bit more strict if necessary. So, for instance, statewide, there's a 30-year rule for milestones and safety inspections. But if you went through that law, it said that the local jurisdictions can make it as stringent as a 25-year rule if necessary. And it also has given compliance through these local jurisdictions to track and monitor these inspections. So a lot of times we'll get calls saying, well, we've done a milestone. Do we need to do the safety inspection or vice versa? And the local laws really break down what's entailed. If you've already done the safety inspection, or what we used to call the 40-year inspection, how that ties into the milestone. So it's important to know that both are related and that the local jurisdiction will be the one that essentially governs the process that you're under. As we go through, let's dive in a little deeper into some of these local requirements. And we'll start with Broward County. We'll see how it differs from the statewide law. And obviously we can't go into every nuance of the law, but we'll have on the slides where you can find those regulations. And if you have certain questions, then put it in the Q&A, and then we'll be able to regroup at the end of the presentation to see if there's certain concerns or clarifications that are needed. So before we dive into the county requirements, what is the intention of these laws? And as we look at the building safety, it's to make sure that these buildings are not only structurally safe, but also electrically safe. And that may be one of the things that maybe confuses people when it comes to the milestone versus these local safety laws, because again, the milestone is a structural safety inspection looking for substantial deterioration, but these local building safety regulations also require electrical safety inspections as well. So it's not just one discipline or one inspection, it's actually two. And the laws are clear that an architect or an engineer need to do this. And then as we go through into Broward and Dade and some parts of Palm Beach, we'll see that it cannot only be an architect in some cases. There may be elevated or more advanced certifications that are needed by these professionals to qualify these buildings. One question that we get all the time is, are these inspections attempt to bring buildings up to code? And the answer is no. It's a safety inspection, not a code compliance. So a good example that can be used is some of the older buildings have railing heights that are 36 inches or 3 feet. The new code says it needs to be 40, so we wouldn't be going through the building to identify that these railings need to be retrofitted or replaced. It's not that type of inspection. This is simply to see if there's any safety issues, if there's any repairs that need to be made to make sure that we avoid a situation where there could be some level of danger, or in the extreme circumstance, something that happened like what we saw in the collapse in Surfside, where buildings could be affected to that point that we could have a catastrophic event. So the whole goal is to avoid that type of scenario. And so the question might be, why is that necessary? And if we know Florida, we know that it's a very aggressive environment with the humidity in the air, with the salt water. It's just a breeding ground for deterioration and advanced, let's call it decay, of whether it's be concrete, structural systems. These things can exacerbate into bigger issues, and so there's a need to really focus on the maintenance and repair of these elements before we have a catastrophic or a major repair that needs to be done. And even more so, we're in what we call a hurricane zone. So South Florida is prone to these natural events, and so part of the stricter rules that we have as a state has to do with these hurricanes. And obviously the intent is to keep these buildings safe and well maintained so that there's no risk to human life. So as we dive deeper into Broward County, here's where we see some of the nuances that are different than, again, the milestone or statewide law. So in Broward County, there's a sweeping rule that all buildings that are governed by this program, this building safety program, need to be inspected at the 25-year mark. So again, we like to say the 40-year inspection, which was true back in the day. It used to be the 40-year mark, but after the collapse in Surfside and the new rules, the mark has been moved in Broward County to the 25-year mark. And if you look at the program states that during June through August, the letters of notifications will go out to owners that the inspections are due. And then from there, you have 180 days from receiving that notice or the date of the notice to get the repairs done. And then once you do to get your report done. And then once you get your report done, then you have another 180 days to repair items that can be done in a short period of time. And then you can get extensions if needed to repair more major items or things that require more planning. But the interesting thing, as you read the rule, it says that even if you don't get a notice, you still are required to do the inspection. So the excuse can't be, I didn't get a notice or I didn't know, because the program really puts the onus back on the owners of the building to be aware of this mark. And so one thing that we can do proactively is to know when the CO date is, because that's when these dates go by. So if we look at the property appraiser, if we research the property, we can see the year built and the year the occupancy was granted. And from there, you can calculate your 25-year mark. But more so than that, we can be proactive in doing repairs. We can be hiring professionals early on if necessary to give us a status check and to see if there's anything that we need to be aware of. But more importantly, Broward County is putting the onus on the individuals to be aware of the rule, to be proactive with it, and to not use the excuse of not getting a notice. One thing that we could also do is make sure that whoever's our registered agent on Sunbiz or for the company is up to date, because if not, that's where your letters are going to go. And so it may be 3 months or so before you realize that it's gone to the wrong person. So to make sure our company information is up to date is very important to getting these notices timely. And again, the onus is put on Broward County back to us as the owners to get these inspections done in a timely way. Another consideration which is unique to Broward County is that if your building is what they call a threshold building, which is 50 feet tall, or in some cases says greater than 3 stories, or if it has an occupancy of 5,000 square feet and has more than 500 people as part of the classification, you can't just use an engineer or architect. The Broward County is requiring that you use a special inspector. And also, if you're doing the electrical inspection, it needs to be an electrical engineer who specializes in electrical design. And so this is part of the application and the check off on the forms that you're hiring the right professionals. And this is important because if you hire a firm that doesn't have these qualifications, then your report won't be accepted because they can't sign off. And also, you may be putting yourself at risk because you'll be spending money on a firm that essentially can't take you to the end. So it's important to know that in Broward County, threshold buildings, 4 stories or more, 50 feet tall, or with this occupancy, if you are non-exempt to the rule, then you're required to use a more specialized or certified professional to do your structural engineer and structural safety inspection and electrical safety inspection. Now, one of the things that is different again in the county versus the statewide law is that the county works off of exemptions, and the only buildings that are exempt in Broward County are government or state buildings, school buildings, single-family homes, or anything that's not really considered multifamily, townhomes, and then what they call minor structures, which are buildings that are less than 3,500 square feet. So it's not based on if you're a condominium or co-op solely, or if you're 3 stories or more, it's based on these exemptions. So you could be a 2-story condominium in Broward County and still get a notice. You could be a commercial building in Broward County and get the notice. But again, what's important about Broward County is that the law that governs the safety inspection says that if you complete these inspections, you've sufficed to your milestone. So you won't have to do the milestone again. Or if you've already been on the track and done your 40-year inspection at the time, or did your inspection before the new rules came out, you would not need to do another inspection. You would just be on the same timeline, which is 10 years after that. So Broward County has adopted the milestone as part of the rules, and by sticking to the county's guidelines, you're also meeting the state guidelines. Now, if we dive a little closer to Miami-Dade County, you can see there's some more nuances there. So in general, in Miami-Dade County, the year mark is 30 years, which coincides with the statewide rules. But if you're a condo or co-op and you're close to the coast, you have a 25-year rule on you. And so it's important to know where you are in terms of geography. And you can see that there's a difference in the timeline. But also in Dade County, you're also required to do additional inspections, such as a parking lot illumination study. And if you have guardrails around your parking lot, you're also required to check those as well. So it's not only a different timeline, but also 2 extra inspections or checks to be done in this county. Again, something to be aware of, because if you're retaining a firm to do it, they have to be able to do the parking lot illumination studies as well, or have the capabilities to check that. It's not as simple as the milestone, and definitely not as simple as doing it in Broward County. Here are some other changes as well, or different circumstances for Miami-Dade County. So in Dade County, it's 90 days from receiving the notice. Then from there, you have 150 days from submitting that report to do what they call non-permitted repairs, which means you don't need to get a permit to do those, or you have 150 days to secure permits to do work that requires that. Again, as we talk about threshold buildings, Dade County is clear that they want what they call a Florida registered structural engineer. So that's not just simply somebody who says I'm a structural engineer. It's somebody who the state has recognized through their qualifications that they are a registered structural engineer, and it's a qualification or certification that they have, and that's what is required to do anything that's a threshold building. And the same goes for a threshold building with electrical engineer. They need to be specialized in electrical design. It can't simply be an engineer who is a jack of all trades, so to speak, or an architect in these cases when it comes to threshold buildings. Also, difference in Miami-Dade County is that the minor structures that are exempt are 2,000 square foot or less, and government buildings and so on are also exempt, but the qualification that exempts you is a lot different in terms of square footage, where you saw 3,500 square foot in Broward County is now 2,000 square foot in Dade County. So as we jump from Broward, where you saw certain rules, you go to Dade County, you have certain nuances, and now in Palm Beach County, it's a little different. There's no county rule that governs the county that's different than the milestone. So the milestone law is what is mostly recognized. However, there are cities in Palm Beach County that have more stringent requirements. You have Boynton Beach, you have Boca Raton, you have Highland Beach. And so it's very important in Palm Beach County to do the due diligence into your local jurisdiction, because you can see right here between Boynton Beach and Boca Raton that the age of the building is different. In Boynton Beach, it's more like Broward County, where at the 25-year mark, they're requiring you to do both the structural and electrical inspection. And in Boca, it's at the 30-year mark. So again, 5-year difference and in a very close proximity to each other. But again, if you're in Palm Beach County, I implore you to just be very familiar with the jurisdiction requirements. In general, there's not many programs that exist in the county, but it's more along the lines of the milestone. But Boynton Beach, Boca Raton, Highland Beach are definitely ones that have their own program. And again, if you dive a little deeper into Boynton Beach and Boca Raton, you can see that the deadlines are a little different. So in Boynton Beach, it's similar to Broward, 180 days to get your repairs done after you have the report submitted. Whereas in Boca Raton, they try to alert you about a year before, and your notice is written, your deadline is written in your notice. And then once you've completed and your report is accepted by the city, so not just delivered, but accepted, then you have 30 days if you need repairs to submit what they call a repair plan. And that's, again, different from other places, but unique to Boca Raton. Oh, before I jump into what these inspections entail, I'll see if there's any questions that have come up so far, or if Natalie has seen any questions. We have Natalie from the company with us as well, and she's fielding questions. Natalie, anything that's come up so far that
there's a question coming up about the regulations for Lee County. What are the regulations for Lee County? And the person is talking about their 2-story building of 28 years old.
Lee County, from my understanding, Lee County doesn't have a recertification program in itself, but it would follow the milestone. I can check real quick. Yeah, I don't see anything coming up for recertification that's different in Lee County, but statewide, if you don't have a requirement that's local, then you're under the milestone law, which is statewide, and there's regulations, there's forms that say that at the 30-year mark, you need to go ahead and look for substantial deterioration. Okay, so let's jump into what these inspections entail, because we get a lot of questions of, well, what are you looking for? What are you going to do? But with all these programs, the inspections are laid out on the county's websites. They're not proprietary, they're outlined. And so as we go through the inspections, the first step is a visual structural or visual electrical inspection. And that's going to be general throughout the building. The engineers are going to come on site and go into readily accessible areas and into different units, maybe to check if there's anything that's open and obvious, or if there's anything that requires further testing or what they call manual inspection, which means that we may be removing some things to gain better access. So generally, though, the inspection is visual unless required to be more invasive, depending on the findings that we have. And as we go into the structural safety inspection, here's what we're looking at. So again, the law is clear that we need to be looking at foundations, we need to be looking at the roof, we need to look at main structural elements. In some cases, we need to go on the balconies to check the guardrails. And in Miami-Dade specifically, like we said before, there's a parking lot guardrail checklist or report that needs to be filed, as well as the other safety inspections. But this is visual. We're going to be looking at not the entirety of the building, but the available readily accessible areas, as well as sample sizes of whether it be units or electrical rooms, different rooms that we can go into to get a better understanding of the building. And the same goes for the visual electrical inspection. So we're going into the main electrical rooms. We're going to be looking at the breakers. We're going to be looking at the electrical equipment. We're going to be testing the emergency lights. We're going to be in Miami-Dade County looking at the parking lot illumination to see if it's at the right levels to be considered safe. But again, the first or initial phase is visual, and if there's no reason to do anything else that's more invasive, whether it be manual or additional testing, if everything is checked, then essentially the safety inspection is over. And part of what the engineer will be doing as well is they'll be going through permit records, they'll be looking at the existing documentation, they'll be getting as much information on repairs and the existing conditions of the building, and then from there they'll be able to determine if there's anything that's needed to be checked further. And so if we look into the structural inspection of things, if we have to go further, then what the manual inspection would entail would be the removing concrete, if necessary, removing stucco finishes to see if there's advanced deterioration or rust on the rebar that is extensive. We may be doing geotechnical testing to see if there's any issues with settlement. If there's no records to tell when the roof was replaced, and if there's signs that show that there may be leaks or issues with the roof, then there may be roof moisture surveys. And in some cases, we have to do penetration radar testing to find out if there's any issues with post-tensioning, steel, or anything that could be adversely affecting an area. And again, these further steps are necessary if for some reason damage is found. It could be substantial or just areas where there's a concern that we're going to be opening up or exploring more to determine what the extent of the repair is. In the same token, we have the extra testing that has to be done on electrical equipment. In some areas like Highland Beach, Boca Raton, in Dade County, thermography is required for systems that are greater than a certain rating. So we'll have to be using infrared to scan equipment to see if there's any hot spots or if there's any latent issues that you can't see with the human eye. We'll be testing GFCI outlets. We'll be testing smoke alarms. Again, in the attempt to see if there's any safety concerns or anything that could be a concern that could cause a risk to residents. So predominantly visual. If there's any concerns, then we'll be going a little bit more deeper through manual testing and through inspections as well. Now, as we look into some of the conditions, which is more easier to see, the question is what would be a passing building look like and a failing building? And generally speaking, the damage to concrete, damage to steel is kind of readily apparent when it's advanced, and you can see in the pictures the contrast there. You can see a balcony that has a concrete spall on the underside where there's rust and a huge crack. So that's something that is open and obvious, and I'm not saying that a layperson could diagnose the issue, but it's very visible when there's distress in the concrete. Similar with the roof, you can see on the failing side, there's ponding on the roof, there's staining, there's issues, there's leaks that are happening, And if the building hasn't replaced the roof in many, many years and there's no records of maintenance, then that may be an area of concern. You can see on the passing side that a well-maintained roof, you can see all the roof walkways are clean. You can see that there's no clutter, no staining. You can see on the balcony there that there's no cracks, there's no deteriorating concrete. And as well as the paint and so on with the passing side, it's very clean, it's very crisp. And so this is what we implore clients and owners to do, is just keep up to date with repairs, repair things the right way. Don't allow them to reach the point where it's deteriorated. And if on the failing side, you can see that rusting connection there. You know, interestingly, that connection was put there to be a protection during hurricanes, because when Hurricane Andrew hit this property, there was a lot of devastation. And so they came back with a solution that was to put these extra connections in on posts to slabs to secure these balconies down. But because it's not protected, not repaired, you can see there that it's rusted all the way through. And so it's no longer providing protection from hurricanes. And in that case, where the residents think they're protected, in fact, it's a repair that's needed. And that element was only found by doing some manual testing, by removing coverings to see how badly that thing was damaged. As we look at electrical items, you can see on the failing side, you can see wires that are everywhere, messy electrical rooms. You can see emergency lighting that's not lighting up once it's engaged. One of the pictures there, you can see even a water line that's running through the electrical equipment, which obviously wouldn't be a good thing if that ruptures. So again, the failing of electrical items could be open and obvious. You could have breakers that are not labeled. You could have equipment in that are fire hazards and so on. So on the passing side, you can see that the breakers are clearly labeled, rooms are clear, and equipment and connections are clean. And obviously the emergency systems are working when tested. Now, what happens when repairs are required? Now, sometimes what we found is that we submit reports and it outlines repairs, and the board either wants to sit on it or they want to try and do things themselves without engaging the professionals. And I'd say we definitely don't want to do that. Once you have repairs and you want to get the proper guidance, you want to check with the cities to see if permits are required, and you want to start repairs as soon as possible. And then once repairs are done, then the professional will come back in, they'll inspect, and then they'll issue the report at the end of the day that says that there's no repairs needed. So the inspection itself is not the end. It's until you get that clean certification, and we'll look at some of the reports later that show the checkbox. But once you get that check off that you've passed and that there's no repairs, that's when it's finished. You don't want to just get the report and sit on it. And here's a recap of some of the deadlines. So Broward County, again, differs from Miami-Dade County, which differs from Boca Raton, right? So you need to be aware of what's required per jurisdiction. But essentially, you have a timeline from getting the notice to submitting a report. Once a report comes, if there's repairs needed, then you're on another timeline to get these repairs either taken care of or to get the permits in place or have a repair plan produced to the city to show how you're going to take care of this. If you don't follow this, then the timeline doesn't stop. You could either be one, getting fined later on, or required to appear before magistrates to explain why the repairs haven't been done. More importantly, as time goes by, the repairs that are needed could become worse. And we've seen issues that could be stucco repairs that become concrete repairs, and that balloons in cost. So we don't want to sit on the need for repairs. We want to move ahead and make sure these things are done timely to avoid any issues, not just to do with fines or compliance issues, but to make sure that the scope stays contained of the repairs. So how does the engineer or architect help you through the process? So through bidding the work, let's say you get your notice and you have the task now to select the engineer. You want to know the local laws, but if you're dealing with a professional firm that's familiar with the area and with the laws, they'll educate you. They should make sure they have the right team that's needed. So you wouldn't want to hire a firm that doesn't have an electrical engineer if that's needed, or you wouldn't want to get a firm involved that can't do infrared inspections, because what happens is the bids won't be apples to apples. So the engineer should educate you, should give you the proper scope to do the report. And then from there, like I said, if you have repairs that are needed, the process doesn't stop. It's at that point that you want to have the repairs properly scoped, the permits pulled, and you want the engineer to guide you through the repairs, because at the end of the day, they'll have to sign off on the repairs. So a mistake I see clients make sometimes is that they get the report, then they fix things, and they may do that with permits or without permits, and then they come back and say it's finished, and that they want you to reinspect. And that may be risky, because if it's a complex repair and it's not done correctly and the engineer can't sign off on it, then you may have to do it again, or you may have to open areas to be checked. And so we don't want to get to that point where you might end up spending money twice because we decided to do it in a way that's not clearly defined or accepted by the cities. And another point here that we see is that all these laws and rules show that the person that's guiding things needs to be a licensed engineer or a licensed architect. So we don't want to start with a professional that's not correct, because they can't sign off on the report. So the firms that should be leading the process should be these individuals, not necessarily a contractor or some other entity, because at the end of the day, we don't know if they're looking to get work on the back end or if they can even sign off on the report. So you may be going down a road that's not really leading anywhere, because at the end of the day, you're not following the guidelines of these rules. So it's best just to go to architect, engineer, or well-known firms that have these individuals to help you through the process. Now, as we look at the reports, we can see here that the reports are very standardized, and it's the same with the milestone. So nothing is really proprietary. It follows a very systematic checklist as well as descriptions. So one thing that a board or owners could do is, if you're curious about the inspection, if you go to any of the websites from Dade County or Broward County, you can pull the form off. You also receive the form with some of the notices, and you can look through and see what's going to be checked. So you can start gathering data on repairs that you've already done, which will help with the inspection, or you can be aware that if you haven't fixed your roof in a long time, that this may be an area of concern. Now, again, it's not a recommendation to go do it yourself. It's just you can be aware of what you need to take care of and what needs to be maintained as you approach the mark that's required by the county for the safety inspection. And as we look closer, you can see that there's check boxes there on the Broward County form. It says no repairs required. So if you do an inspection, we check no repairs required. It's signed, it's sealed, it's delivered, you're done. If repairs are required, then again, you go on that timeline for repairs. You can see in the Dade County form, there's also check marks for substantial deterioration. There's check marks for dangerous conditions and different notifications that need to be done if that's found on the property. So as we look a little bit further on the reports, there's certain things that need to be outlined. Obviously, again, it needs to be an engineer or architect that needs to sign and seal this. In some situations, it needs to be a special inspector or a Florida registered structural engineer, as we saw before. But the programs outline what needs to be reports, and the reports need to be on these forms. They're not going to be accepted if they're not following the forms that are submitted by the county. So before we jump into the responsibilities, we'll take a look and see if there's any questions on the inspections, on anything that we've brought up so far.
There's a question about Miami, the city of Miami. The person, Lisa Marziale, did a milestone inspection. They haven't received the letter though. How would you submit the milestone in the city of Miami?
Well, that's a tricky question. So I guess if the building is already recertified at some point, let's say did its 40 year and it's on that track, then you wouldn't have had to do a milestone. If you did a milestone that's following the statewide law, that's not going to suffice as your structural inspection for the city of Miami, because again, the city of Miami has its own criteria. So, and it also says that if you follow their criteria, you've also met the milestone. So the question would be, there are many different ones. One is, what's the height of the building, right? So if the building is more than 4 stories and it's a threshold building, then you would have need to have a Florida registered structural engineer to have done it, not a regular engineer, right? Or a regular PE. So also, if you're going for recertification in Dade County, you're also required to do an electrical inspection. So the milestone itself, you may have met the statewide law, but you won't be able to use that report to submit to the city unless it's following all the guidelines that are outlined by the county. And again, those guidelines are on the Miami-Dade County page for recertification. And I think in that case, the bigger question to ask is, what's the age? Because if you've already done your recertification before in the past, then there's no need to do anything else because you're on the schedule that's with the county at the time, not necessarily have to do another milestone. Is there another question?
Yeah, another question about Miami Beach buildings within 3 miles of the coast. What are the rules for those buildings?
Well, the rule that is different for buildings 3 miles is that if it's a condo or co-op, three stories or more, so under the same guidelines as the milestone, then your recertification is due at the 25-year mark. And the county has gone through and shown, because there was initial deadlines for the milestone, whether it have been, the end of 2024 and the end of 2025, that if you were in that category of building, you should have already done your recertification. If you're coming up to the 25-year mark, then you'll be looking to do the full recertification if you're a condo or co-op 3 stories or more by the coast in Dade County.
There's one more question about a board who wants to change engineers midstream to cut costs as building are worse than expected. What would be your view of this?
Well, changing engineers is always a challenging entity, and it definitely isn't really a way to save costs for different reasons. One, any engineer that you're going to bring in as a replacement is going to have to do their own due diligence. They can't just accept the work of somebody else and pick up as if they're just connecting, right? They'd have to really be doing work to some extent, which is going to cost. If the issue is to do with construction ballooning and maybe a concern that the engineer is linked with the contractor, then possibly bringing a new engineer in could curtail that because there's not a conflict of interest. But overall, it's not an easy process. It's going to require more engineering time for that person to get up to speed. And if there's designs and drawings in place that are governing repairs, then that engineer either has to redo that or take responsibility for that. So it's not a simple thing. So based on where you are in the project, the recommendation may be to get another engineer involved just to oversee if that's possible, and to maybe provide a second set of eyes, almost like an owner's rep for you, or just understand that changing engineers may not be the most cost-effective way, but it might be the faster way to the end if you do that. But it's not an easy change at all.
Those are the questions so far. Thank you.
Okay. So as we look into the responsibilities, like we said before, the engineer that's going to be retained should be up to date with all the local rules, the statewide rules, because you want to hire somebody that cannot complete the inspection. And we've seen before where we've maybe bid work and maybe lost it, but have been contacted again because that individual didn't have an electrical engineer, or they didn't have someone to do infrared. And so the pricing wouldn't be the same because one firm may be bidding a lower scope. So it's important to one, be aware of what you're asking for. And it's not a secret if you are in Broward County, the rules are there, Miami-Dade County, and again, if the different jurisdictions in Palm Beach have the rules, but also the responsibility of the engineer is to be honest about what they can provide and to let you know that they can either complete the inspection or they can only do a certain portion of it. It's also the responsibility of the engineer to sign and seal these reports and to make sure that they're submitted in a way that can be accepted by the jurisdiction, and that you have the proper guidance going forward that you can complete the process. Again, it's not supposed to be a process that links you to construction unnecessarily. It's not supposed to be a process that takes many, many, many years to complete, unless there's really a true cost, a true reason for that, like a very large restoration project that has to be done. But it should be very straightforward. And if a building is already doing well with maintenance and has a professional involved along the way, then it should just be a checkpoint in time that you're getting a sign off to be able to show that you're in good health and essentially meet any requirements of the state. And some insurance companies as well are requiring to look at these inspections to make sure that you get a good rate on insurance. So it benefits everybody for the process to be simple, straightforward, and to have the right qualifications serving you. The role of the association is important as well. And why? Because the board has the fiduciary responsibility to get these things done. And so sometimes the balance may be, well, the repairs are too expensive or the professionals are too expensive and so on. But as a board, the real goal is to stick to the law and to make sure the building is well taken care of. And with the new laws in place, the milestones as well, there's a liability to delaying, there's a liability to not getting it done. So I implore all board members and communities to accept the fact that these building safety rules and the compliance of them is not only important, but mandatory. And so we don't want to pretend like we don't know or to avoid it, because like we saw in Broward County, if you don't get a notice, you're still required to get these things done. And you can't blame the city for not sending you the notice. So it's on us to be aware and to act timely on these repairs. With the new laws in place, with the structural integrity research study, it helps us to plan and budget, because now if you're a condominium or co-op, you have to have these reserves in place that really cover a lot of what's being looked at in these inspections. So a few years ago, condominiums were taken by surprise, and they would have to take loans out and do all these things to really be ready. But that wasn't the goal of these inspections and the structural integrity reserve study, is to take away the shock value and to really push maintenance and timely inspections onto the community, because it was something that was being neglected. I would say another obligation is to be proactive. And if you're not sure how things are going at the building, then get the professional help, the architect, the engineer, have a condition assessment done so that you can be poised towards a favorable result, or at least a result with these inspections. It's not shocking, because a lot of these issues don't just show up overnight, right? They take time to appear. So if we're doing that proactive maintenance and proactive inspections, then we won't be taken by surprise at the end of the day. So as you look back at what we've covered, and it was quick, and there's a lot in each of these safety inspections. The gist of what I want to impart on you is the importance of just knowing the local law. And again, if you're in Miami-Dade County, there's nuances to that county. Broward County the same, and in Palm Beach County, if you're in certain cities, whether it be Boca Raton, whether it be Boynton Beach, Highland Beach, there are laws and guidelines that are different than the statewide milestone requirements. So it's important to know that, and it's important to be proactive. And as we've seen, the inspections aren't arbitrary. They're clearly outlined. The reports are clear. So there's nothing that anyone needs to be not really afraid of, but it's not something you can't prepare for on your own. You can look through, you can be aware of what's coming. And the interesting thing that I found, again, is if you don't receive a notice, the onus is still on you. So it's not something that we can turn a blind eye to. And so it's very important that we are proactive. And again, if our records for our associations are up to date, we want to make sure our registered agents are clearly outlined, that they will receive these mails in a timely way. And if you have concerns about whether you're on the list for the year, then just take a look at the county's website. You can research your parcel numbers and see if you're on the list. But again, if you look at the year built, the year of CO, and you do the math, 30 years or 25 years from then, you're in the time period where you need to be taking proactive measures to get these inspections done. And again, back to responsibilities, the engineer, the professional, has the duty and the responsibility to guide you through the process. As the association, your responsibility is to move on these inspections, to be proactive and to engage the professionals so that the work can be done, and to obviously repair these through the right process, through permits with qualified contractors and so on. So everybody has a good part to play, and if we do it right, then the process is not a difficult one. It's very straightforward and something that can be easily achieved with the right guidance. Natalie, any more questions came in?
Amazing. Yes. Let's look here. Natalie, do you want to field those, or do you want me to send them to Scott?
Oh, you can send them to Scott.
All right, so let's look here. And while we're answering this, I am going to go ahead and also launch our poll. So please give us your feedback on that. We really, really appreciate it. So important to us to see, how everybody felt about the webinar, what we can do better, what we did right. So please take that. I just launched it. Also, just housekeeping items in case anybody does need to leave since we're just doing the questions and the presentation is done. I will be emailing out the presentation, a link to the video recording for this webinar, Scott's contact information, and then information on all of our future courses. Also, I will be sharing the attendee list with Building Mavens. There was 1 CEU credit for our licensed community association managers, and then 1 continuing education credit for our HOA board members. But let's get to these questions. We've got 2 here. All right, Scott. So condo association has a bottom floor unit and a 2-story townhome above the ground floor unit. Would this be considered a 3-story building in West Palm Beach?
Well, if you said a ground floor garage and then a 2-story townhome above.
Yeah, well, it doesn't say garage. It says a bottom floor unit and a 2-story townhome above that ground floor unit. So it sounds like, it's a unit, someone's unit, and then a 2-story townhome above that ground floor unit. Would this be?
I say it would be. Again, it depends on if it's uninhabited and it was just an open air area, then the law gives a pass for that. But if it's inhabited and it's conditioned and it's a 3-story building, then it would fall under the 3-story rule.
Perfect. All right, we've got another one here. If doing corrective action to the electrical panels, we have to disconnect power, then condos have to be vacated. Who is responsible to pay for a hotel stay for affected condo owners until work is completed?
Well, we haven't had to do any buildings like that everybody has to be vacated. But if the repair needs to be done and it's warranted, then that would be the association. If there's some reason that people have to be relocated. But I'd say talk with the attorneys, look at the bylaws. But if there's a repair that's necessary, then it may simply be that people have to find their own accommodations, but it can't be avoided if it's a critical repair. But I don't think it would be, it's obviously not going to be anybody but the condominium in a whole that's going to be responsible for the payments.
Perfect. And it doesn't look like we have any more open. Oh, here comes another one. Just kidding. So yeah, if you do have any more questions, now's the time to ask. All right, here's another one. If a condo has a ground floor dedicated to commercial uses and 2 floors above dedicated to dwellings, is that still considered 3 stories?
Again, if it's conditioned and being used, then yes. If it's commercial and residential above. And again, if it's a certain county like Broward County or Dade County, it wouldn't matter if it's 3 stories or less, because that's not what governs that. Similar to Boca Raton and so forth. So it just depends on where you are, because it's not the height of the buildings anymore, unless it's a threshold building that governs whether you need these inspections, whether you're an exempt building or not.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I don't see any more open questions on here. Actually, did I just get one? I did. Is there a PE certification verification website?
Sure. Yeah, if you go on to, I think it's myfloridalicense.com, you can search companies, you can search individuals by last name, and it should tell you what their certification is, if it's active, if there's any disciplinary actions against them. So it's all public record that you can look up. And
Perfect.
also tells you their discipline as well.
Perfect, perfect. So thank you everyone for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing everyone at our next webinar. Thank you so much, Scott. Appreciate you.
All right, bye everyone. Thank you for your time.
Have a good one. Thanks for watching. For more great educational content, click the subscribe button now.